to say, so I'm a writer for the government.
Like the Batman of coffee roasters.
Yeah, a lot less cooler version of the Batman for coffee.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to Why Bother, the podcast where we explore why creative people bother doing things the hard way. I'm your host, Gareth Davies from Maker House. I'm here with Will Wells, the founder of the Artery Community Roasters. Thanks, Will, for joining us.
Thanks, Gareth. Pleasure to be here.
Yeah, I'm so excited to dive in. We've been working together for a few years, selling your coffee at the shop. I've admired your business for longer than that. We even have a bit of a personal connection through one of my high school friends. Yeah. So we're going to learn a bit about the backstory of the Artery, why Will got into this, the motivation, also what else he does in his day job. So let's dive in.
For sure.
We'd like to start with something fun, a little rapid fire.
All right.
We call this bother or not bother. So those are your two answers. Here we go. It is winter now, so I'm going to throw out some seasonal stuff like cross-country skiing.
Bother.
I like it. All right. Pineapple on pizza?
Bother.
I like it. All right. TikTok?
Not bother. Too much work.
All right. Too much work. You're a coffee guy, obviously. Cream and sugar?
Not bother.
Straight?
Oh, yeah. Black.
All right. Eggnog?
Not bother. No.
No?
Not
okay.
an eggnog guy.
What about Yule log?
I don't even know what a Yule log really is, to be honest with you. So not bother, I guess.
It's just a cake.
I thought I was like, it's either a cake or something you put in the fire. But so I'm gonna say maybe
fire version.
Yeah. Not bother. Yeah.
Cake version.
I don't even know if I've had it before. Is it like fruit cake? I'm gonna say not bother. I don't know.
All right, he's being shy about the Yule log. On that note, fruit cake.
Not bother.
Yeah, me neither.
Yeah.
Who eats fruitcake?
I assume the Yule log was kind of like a fruitcake, so
that's why you were not bothering. Yeah. Okay, awesome. Thanks for playing Bother Not Bother. Let's get into more of the backstory. This is why people are tuning in. They want to know more about the Artery. So obviously running your own business, it's not an easy thing. Well, first of all, tell people what is your day job, and you still have it. And then when did you make the pivot, and why did you bother jumping into your own coffee roastery?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. So I'm a public servant by day and a coffee roaster by night, as I like to say. So I'm a writer for the government.
Like the Batman of coffee roasters.
Yeah, a lot less cooler version of the Batman for coffee. But so a public servant and still do that. And I have a really supportive team that lets me do things like this. You know, I can take time off and do kind of this stuff, and then I can not sleep and roast coffee till the wee hours of the night.
Obviously drink it to keep you awake.
Yeah, right. And and the way I got into it is I've been a volunteer with this organization called Able To, which is formerly Citizen Advocacy, and just around the corner here on Parkdale. Yeah. And for a long time, I'd volunteered people with disabilities and befriended people with disabilities. And the one constant theme I heard from my friends was, we have some social supports, we have some housing supports, and those aren't always ideal, but at least they have those things. Mm-hmm. But one thing that they didn't really have was like worthwhile, meaningful employment. So a lot of people with disabilities kind of get these like tokenism hires where they're given like a volunteer position. And I always tell the story of one of my employees when she first started with me. And at the time, our salary started around $16.50 an hour. And now we're $19.60 an hour to keep up with living wage.
Nice.
And so when I first told her $16 an hour or $16, she said, "Oh, for the day?" And I said, "No, per hour."
Right.
And she was kind of flabbergasted because her previous job, she was making $3 a day. So just to give you an idea of like some people with disabilities are really taking advantage of. And so, one thing I really wanted to do was just create somewhere where people could get, experience and support network and just have a, meaningful employment and paid at a living wage. So we already have 6 employees, and most of them are working part-time, but they all get paid a living wage, and they all kind of belong to the Artery network, which is not something a lot of us take for granted. Going to work, sometimes going to work is a drag. And, but for some people who never really had that experience and maybe don't have as big a support network as other people do, that's something pretty meaningful to go somewhere where you have friends, where you have a sense of belonging, where you have a sense of purpose. So for me, that's kind of in a nutshell why I kind of jumped in and we started in December 2020. So it was just kind of like my friend Ian Fraser, who was the director at Run Ottawa, had a space for us and said, why don't you try it out? And so all this dream I'd been telling people kind of went into fruition in about 2 months, and we started the Artery. Yeah.
So you're almost 3 years in,
yeah,
or about 3 years in right now, and it all started with that motivation was really employment for people with disabilities, your friends, people you've been working with through Able To. First of all, just kudos. Like, I can't say it enough how impressive that is on you. And obviously that's a community that deserves meaningful employment as much as anybody, on top of those other supports that you mentioned. Why coffee?
Yeah.
Because you could theoretically create meaningful employment through other means, but is coffee a passion that you
so I mean, I love coffee, and coffee is something that I used to I'd always been a coffee roaster, quote unquote, or a home roaster. And I'd been roasting coffee in my garage for a while and doing it for friends, doing it for family, doing it for charity events. So I always thought that the social enterprise idea I had would involve coffee. And originally I thought it'd be more of a coffee shop model, but I thought back to like the days where I was a barista and like how much I hated that job. So
that's a demanding
It's
position.
one of the hardest jobs. So like, I was just like, I don't want to necessarily put people through that. So I was
direct customer facing.
So I was like,
can you draw a little face in my latte?
Right. Yeah. And it's just people always upset about the texture of the milk. Anyways, it's a whole thing. Right. So I was like, I'm just going to do the back end, and I can focus more on producing quality coffee, on sourcing quality coffee.
Yeah. And hopefully you've been embraced by the community. I know our customers at Maker House, your coffee is our best seller far and away. And I think people really gravitate towards the meaning of the social enterprise. You put it right out there. Even the name, the Artery, is about like the heart and the heartbeat of the community.
Yeah.
So I think you nailed all of that, and your messaging is really strong. And you also, live it. You walk the walk. It's not just talk with you guys. You have a living wage to start with your employees. You're one of a handful of businesses in Ottawa that are doing that are leading on that. So that really resonates with customers.
Yeah.
Is that what you've been finding in the 3 years?
For sure. And I think like an important part for me was also matching the quality with the ethics. So it's great to have that ethical model of hiring and stuff too. But I also wanted to make sure that when people actually bought the coffee, they loved it. So I always kind of say like, I remember when I was a kid and I would sell chocolate bars for my baseball team, and they were always really bad chocolate bars.
It's whatever you got to sell.
Right. And your neighbors would buy them one time to support your team or whatever, but then they would never buy that chocolate bar again. So I wanted to make sure that the chocolate bar I was selling, the coffee, was going to keep you coming back. So we were going to get customers in the door just to try us out because they want to support our cause.
Of course, yeah.
Then when they actually try the coffee, they're like, oh my God, that's the best coffee. And we do have, I think, some of the best coffee in Ottawa. And just to give you an idea, our ethics don't just stop at our hiring, but also at our sourcing. So the coffee farmers we work directly with are the same farmers who are on our menu year in, year out. If you look at your shelf, like it's the same name on that coffee bag because we buy from them every year. We have genuine relationships with them, and we pay the farmers a higher farm gate than is usual for most other coffee roasters. So that's something that's really important to me too, is to make sure that the complete value chain is ethical and is quality driven.
That is my next question. So it's a really good segue. You can unpack that a little bit more with, what's something in your business that you do choose to do the hard way. I think we've covered a few things already.
Everything.
And of course, why? Why do you continue to do things
for sure
in a more challenging way?
Yeah. And I think so, like a lot of coffee businesses as they scale up, the first thing they kind of do is start to dip in quality because it's easier to source coffee from a big company that's just going to get the coffee for you. That's going to give you a cheaper price on kind of mechanically dried.
You're like, our margins are going to be great here.
Yeah. So
Folgers, we're the next Folgers.
And even then, even some specialty coffee roasters, right? They necessarily don't put in the effort and the money into sourcing the way we do. So I would say for us, it would have been a lot easier had I just bought cheaper coffee, right? I don't think we would have been as successful because the coffee wouldn't have tasted as good and I wouldn't have felt as good about the product. Yes, that's really important to me, is just to make sure that we're sourcing coffee ethically and that we can really stand behind every bag and every bean of coffee that we source. So that was always something that's definitely a harder way to do it. But I think in the end, it's better for our business. And that's something that, we're always going to stay true to. So, whenever I get approached by big grocery chains and that kind of stuff, being like, we're interested in being on our shelves.
Can we scale you up? We want to buy
it just
cases or pallets.
Yeah, it just doesn't fit with my model because they want such cheap coffee, right? Mm-hmm. And ethics aren't cheap, quality isn't cheap. So for me, I just can't bend like that, right? I can't, if I'm not going to want to drink the coffee, I don't want to sell the coffee.
Right.
Yeah. So, and I'd say everything we do is hard as a small business. We always try and find ways to save costs where we can, but I always want to make sure that I have jobs for my employees. So instead of buying a machine that fills the bags automatically, we fill the bags by hand. So things like that, where, there'd be easier ways of doing things and automating things. I just don't want to go down that route, or at least not yet if it's going to cost people jobs.
Yeah. So you're staying true to the purpose, the original vision,
for sure,
and motivation for the business. But are you able to keep things profitable to be able to reinvest?
Yeah, I mean, like I always say, like our coffee's too expensive is one of what we have in the back of our t-shirts, and I kind of lean into that because I think that coffee should be expensive. A lot of people have this notion
or it should be the true cost,
right? Yeah, so it should be equitable to what you're paying for, and while inflation rises, people still have this notion that coffee should still just cost like $10 or $12 a pound. Like it seems like inflation doesn't affect coffee prices, right? Which is absurd. Inflation definitely affects coffee prices. We've had wild increases in our costs.
Well, fuel costs for one thing.
Yeah, everything, and then the materials for the farmers and the producers. So yeah, of course, costs are up for us, and we still find ways to make our business profitable. So we ask a higher price for a coffee than you're going to get at Loblaws or anything like that, but the quality is going to be better, the ethics are going to be better. So you're just going to get what you pay for at the end of the day. As easy as that is to say. And it's hard for us. Sometimes I don't want to necessarily sell certain bags for that much, but when I'm paying the farmer a high farm gate price, we just aren't getting the coffee as cheap as some people are even selling the coffee. Like some of our green beans are just really expensive. That's just the reality. There's
a huge education component to this. And you're one of those businesses I would think of first when it comes to consumers learning about the true costs of things, and in a good way. Like, because everybody, or a lot of people that we work with and our customers at Maker House, they also value that social enterprise model, that community model. And they want to shop somewhere they know is paying, fair prices, fair wages, and building up local suppliers and makers. So this leads to our next question. Our last question for this first segment is about the
cost of convenience.
Yeah.
And what's something you can think of that other people do the easy way, and what might be the hidden cost of that? Because, you mentioned the reason it costs more is because you're paying the true cost of things.
Right. Yeah. And I think, like, just to lead in from the last thing, I think some other competition, there's a few roasters in Ottawa that I buy coffee from as well, and that are doing things the right way. There's a lot too that are taking those shortcuts. So for them, the cost of convenience is buying from large multinationals, buying cheaper coffee, buying blended coffee. Like all our coffees are mostly single producer coffees. So our coffees are fully traceable, whereas their coffees, we'll just say a country on the bag, whereas ours has a name on the bag and a variety on the bag. So I would say the cost to them, of convenience is higher margins and easier sourcing. But I do think that customers who want ethics are going to see that coffee bag just says the origin
Guatemala.
And with no other information and no other tangible traceability of the coffee. And I think they're also going to taste that difference too. Like if you put our coffee next to those coffees, like our coffee is going to be more unique, more profile driven, also because we're roasting the coffee a little lighter than a lot of other roasters too. So that's going to preserve a lot of the flavor.
Oh, nice.
But at the end of the day, just, it's a single variety of coffee. So instead of having a bag full of different apples, you have one apple, so you can taste that like traceability. You can taste what that actual coffee variety is giving you flavor wise, right? So I think that is one thing that other people are doing for cost convenience that will cost them in the end. But at the same time, like I don't want to play like we're like ethical in everything we do. Like as much as ethics drives our business, sometimes the convenience of shopping from an Amazon or shopping from Uline, where it's the only kind of way I can get that thing I need for that event by tomorrow is going to Amazon or going to Uline versus trying to source it myself and paying, local business more or that kind of thing. So that to me kind of goes against our ethics, right? It goes against like supporting these big companies, but sometimes it is a necessary evil. So I think that like, as much as I like get on my like moral, ethical high horse, there's also things in our business that we're also evaluating and questioning if we're doing it as ethical as we could be. So I think that's part of business is balance. Like you can't always do everything the way you intended to or the way you want to for cost or
we don't live in an ideal world.
Yeah. And especially when you're a small business, like it's always funny when small businesses are asked to be more ethical than big businesses, right? So it's like,
That's
how come our ethics are put more under the microscope than Amazon or Loblaw's ethics, right? So it's like they have the profit margins, and they have the money to do things more ethically, but they are just looking at their shareholder bottom line, right?
Yeah.
So small businesses, the onus is on us to be more ethical, even though we can't really afford to do everything as ethical as we want to, but we still eat into our margins and eat into our own kind of like work-life balance just to make sure we can attain those ethics. I think you should hold businesses to ethical standards, but I think you should hold all businesses to ethical standards. And there's a bit of a stigma that exists for social enterprises where, people think we're just a charity. And I think the stigma shouldn't be on social enterprise. I think the stigma should be on other companies who aren't pursuing things ethically or not pursuing a lot of their avenues ethically. So
or they have the resources and a lot of room to grow in terms of ethical business practices.
Yeah.
Really good point. And we could probably unpack a whole other podcast on, why aren't big businesses doing better?
Right.
I also think The Life of a Barista is probably a podcast, and we should probably spin that one off too. We're going to take a little bit of break and then come back. So please stay tuned. And by the way, if you've been watching or listening to our podcast, please do like and share it. Subscribe if you can. It's going to help us get a feel for whether we should do another season. We're wrapping up our first season here with Will today. So stay tuned for our second segment coming up with the Artery Community Roasters. Welcome back to Why Bother. I'm here, Gareth from Maker House, with Will from the Artery. Let's dive back in for our second segment. We're going to start with a not so fun fact about the coffee industry and actually the Artery coffee roasters specifically. Unemployment rate for people with disabilities is double, sometimes probably even more, what it would be for someone without disabilities. And they tend to get paid less, anywhere from 5 to 25% less for the same job. So tell us how this relates to your business, your industry, or just, general employment.
Yeah, I mean, it's a huge, there's so many barriers that exist for people with disabilities to enter the workforce. And it's just inequitable with the skill set and the unique perspectives people with disabilities have, especially in this climate where people are so desperate for employees, yet they still have more than double the unemployment rates people with disabilities. So there's something wrong there, right? Where we have these talented people with unique perspectives who want to work, and they just aren't getting the opportunities. And also when layoffs do come around, they're routinely the first people to be let go. So, those kind of issues drive me to keep doing what we're doing. And a big part of our mission too is, yes, to hire people with disabilities, but to also convince other businesses that they too can do what we're doing.
Break the stigma down.
Yeah.
Because I think the perception is they couldn't do it as well because they have a disability, or this work isn't accessible.
Right.
Like, you need to be able to stand up.
Right. And I think that the big thing for me is not only is this the right thing to do, but it's also good for your business. So some people need to just be convinced on a pure business perspective. Right. Unfortunately, it's just the way that a lot of, business minds work. And I always tell people you can do this and it'll be good for your business. So not only will you be helping people and giving them a sense of self-worth and giving them real meaningful employment, but your actual clientele will appreciate that you are trying to also give back to the community and also give people opportunities
and
remove barriers. Yeah. So I think, there's something called the hiring chain, which started in the UK, which is essentially, trying to just convince other businesses that hey, look, we're hiring people with disabilities. You can too. And then just to kind of keep that going, because unfortunately the Artery will never be big enough that we can hire as many people as we truly would like. So my goal is just to try and kind of create something locally and ideally eventually nationally, where we're showing other businesses that you too can do what we're doing, and it will help your bottom line and it will help people. So I think it's not that hard of a notion, but it's just like you said, removing that stigma. And I have lots of friends who are good people and good business people, and they just say, oh, we love what you're doing, we just could never do it ourselves. And I tell them, you can do it.
Mm-hmm. Did you have any examples where a job was perceived as not accessible for someone with disabilities, and you got to help them turn it around?
Going back to the barista angle, barista is such a hard job, and a lot of people would think that people with disabilities could not be baristas, but we work with, for instance, a Kingston, your old stomping grounds, coffee shop called Bloomskills Cafe at the Bloomskills Center, and all their staff are people with developmental disabilities. and they are baristas and they are making coffee and they are crushing rushes, as we say in the barista world. And they're doing all the things that any other barista would do.
Yeah.
And they're doing it really well. So I think that like, it's just a matter of giving people opportunity. And, you know, I even get the question a lot too from people saying like, what are the challenges of hiring people with disabilities? And I say they're the same challenges you would get with hiring any staff. You know, sometimes staff will be sick. Sometimes staff may not be as good as one aspect of their job as another job,
right.
Regardless of
training in general. Morale.
Yeah. And I think and something too that some business owners forget is they say, oh, I can never hire people with disabilities. And I'm like, you probably have hired people with disabilities. Like there's a lot of invisible disabilities. So it's not just someone in a wheelchair who's disabled. There is a huge spectrum of disabilities. So I always say like you have probably hired people on your staff with disabilities and just didn't know about it or didn't realize it. So it's one of those things where I think it's a small little hurdle, but it's an insurmountable hurdle in some ways because clearly the stats
feels that way. Yeah.
But I think it's something that can easily be done, and hopefully we can start putting the wheels in motion to help other businesses do what we're doing. And that they too can kind of like spread that hiring train that we're trying to do. Yeah.
I love that. I love when you find like a bridge that clicks a light bulb for people. And you just did that for me, which was you've already got people who are dealing with challenges, whether that's sickness or mental health and other challenges that any employee will bring to the table. So just think of it in those terms and address, you know, what's in front of you to make the job work or not. Right.
Like there will
just
be,
like regular employees, it can also not work out for any sorts of reasons.
For sure.
Related or not to the disability.
And you have to be committed. You have to make sure that you're willing to make your space more accessible. And and luckily now, like the government is funding more grants to help businesses do that kind of stuff. And they're not always the easiest to get. You know, it's the paperwork and making sure your timing for applications is lined up. But it is coming. That kind of funding exists. So I would say, why not try as a business to make your space more accessible, to make your staff more diverse and inclusive? Like it's only going to be better for society and your own business too. So.
Yeah. What can people do just to put a fine point on that? Is it best to like message you directly if they're looking for advice on this? Or is there more of like a structured place that doesn't take up all your time?
Yeah. So I would definitely, I'm always willing to answer questions from small businesses and medium-sized businesses. But I would say like reach out to an organization like Live, Work, Play, a great organization. So, I mean, they'll do a lot of the heavy lifting for you and they'll find the right fit for you. And so those type of organizations are out there and worthy of your time for sure.
Awesome. Yeah. Thanks for sharing that resource, Will. Yeah. So Live, Work, Play, check that out. We'll put a link down below in the description. So for folks watching, listening, check that out. You have another not so fun fact related more to the supply chain of coffee.
Yeah.
So go ahead and share
So,
that.
I mean, I think something to remember is, the people who are actually making the coffee, like as roasters, our job is to take this beautiful green bean that we get directly from farmers we work with and not mess it up, to make sure that we can preserve all the flavor and really highlight how amazing this coffee is. But those people, the producers and the farmers and their staff, the people who are doing the bulk of the work in the coffee industry are severely underpaid across the board. Over 80% of the world's coffee farmers live below the poverty line and are food insecure. Wow. So, I mean, just to give you in perspective, like it is such a tough business and it's only getting harder. And they're just at the bottom of the food chain. So when it comes to...
And it's outsourced, so it's a blind spot.
Yeah, like, and especially...
Nobody sees that day to day.
And the thing is, like, so when you're dealing with a company that's truly kind of engaged in direct trade model, they're going to get more of that. So the price of that bag, they're going to get more of that cost of the bag. Whereas the bigger companies and the less ethical coffee roasters, they're just so far removed from that purchase of the coffee bag. They are getting such a small fraction of it. So it's really sad. So I would say for us, a big part of our business is to ensure that we're paying the farmers we work with and have genuine relationships with what they're worth. And I'd still say we're not paying them enough. Like if it were up to me, our bags would be even more expensive. So I could pay farmers even more. Yeah.
I love that part of your mission. And thanks for highlighting that. I think that's a blind spot people are generally aware of, but as a quick, when you're busy thing that you can do to pay attention to this, it sounds like maybe just looking at the detail, the origin on the bag.
Yeah.
And looking for stamps, I'm guessing fair trade, direct trade.
And fair trade can be really like
greenwashing kind of thing.
Yeah, totally. And I'd say number one thing is like buy from a local business, buy from a local roaster where you can ask them questions, where you can go on their if you go on our website for each product, there's a wealth of information about who grew it, the processing involved, like all the steps involved. Like if a roaster or a business is not giving you that information, it's either because they don't know it or they're kind of ashamed of the traceability.
It's a red flag. Yeah.
So I would say just ask questions. It's not hard. Like I think there's a bit of a cognitive dissonance where people are just kind of like disconnect that. But the reality is like if you truly care about ethics, it's not hard to find out which companies are going to do it.
It's the information age, people.
Yeah,
the information is out there. Ask for it. All right, I like it. A little pivot here to more of a personal background. So tell us, growing up, who was your biggest supporter and why would you pick that person?
Yeah. So, I mean, I definitely start with my parents who were both kind of awesome people. And both of them, my mom was a career public servant who worked her way up to becoming the head auditor of the United Nations. So very like career driven, very remarkable woman. And
sure have big influence on you.
For sure. And just like her hard work relations. And just kind of like never turning, maybe to my detriment, never turning off that work switch. And my dad also
cares a lot.
Yeah. It's funny because she was a career public servant. But my dad always told me, don't become a public servant, which I didn't listen to. But his big thing was you can start a business that also that makes you money, but also gives back. So his big thing was like, use your privilege to give back to people. So that's something that I truly believe in. I'm a very fortunate person.
Yeah. Get the best of both worlds.
I have a good job, everything. Yeah. So like, for me, it's like, how can I make this world just slightly better? Like, I don't have grand illusions that I'm changing anything, but even if I can just do little things and get 5 or 6 people employment and do little things, get farmers more equitable pay, that's something that I can, helps me sleep at night, I guess. And then another person too is my wife, who, apart from like having like in the early years of this business, helping me with like stamping and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, it takes a village.
Definitely. But the big thing for me that she kind of connected me with was volunteering. So she's always been a good person and finding ways to give back. And she got me involved with Able To, as formerly Citizen Advocacy. Nice. And from then I got the bug of wanting to kind of do something for this community. So she's a huge inspiration to me in terms of like setting me on this path and just showing me like how to be a good person.
Yeah. I love that. And so your family growing up had these values, your family today has these values, and it's a big part of who you are, obviously. Yeah. I actually, in Kingston, I went to high school with Laura, who is your wife's sister.
Yeah.
Their mother is Mary, who sadly passed away from a rare blood cancer a few years ago. But you turned that into inspiration for a fundraising coffee. So tell us a bit about that.
Yeah, one of our coffees, which you can buy at Maker House, is called Mary's Finest. And it's a coffee named after my mother-in-law, Mary. And so $2 from each bag goes to the Lymphoma and Leukemia Society of Canada. And in December, we'll have raised $5,000. So really
amazing.
Awesome initiative for us and something that we hope to we'll always have that bag on offer, and something that we hope to keep growing and one day be able to keep funding kind of research and blood cancer.
Yeah, so 5,000 is an amazing start, a couple years into that bag. So Mary's Finest, keep an eye out for that. Not just at Maker House, you can buy direct from the Artery as well. What is that, a light roast, Mary's Finest?
So that one's really interesting because it's so most of our coffees are not blended. We really try and have single varietal coffees. So when you look at our coffees, it'll be one variety, one farmer, or one small co-op. We don't deal with big co-ops. But in this instance, it's a blend that I've made. So it's a light roast bean and a medium roast bean. So both of those beans are...
one of your rare blends, yeah.
Yeah, so both of those beans are fully traceable beans. So it's not like a blended lot as most other coffee is. So it's still 2 fully traceable beans that we've blended together in a light and medium roast. So you get a bit of that nice malic acids from the light roast and more of that caramel chocolatey from the medium roast. Yeah, so it's super nice. Yeah, super easy to drink.
Love it. Yeah. And it's quite popular as well. It's almost the best seller, but we have something called the Stephen Hawkbean.
Yeah, the black hole roast.
Black hole roast. Yeah. So first of all, why did you name it after Stephen Hawking?
Yeah. So we, a lot of our coffees are named after people with disabilities. The majority of them actually. So just to kind of keep with our ethos. And also like people love a catchy name, to be honest with you. I've had people at markets and stuff buy the Stephen Hawkbean just for the name. And I tell them it's a dark roast. They're like, I don't like dark roast, but I like that name so much I'm going to buy the coffee. So obviously part of it's marketing and branding, but for us, it's also just kind of naming the coffee after people who inspire us. So Stephen Hawking, we have our first Crack to the Future named after Michael J. Fox. We have Superfly named for Curtis Mayfield. I put a spell on brew after Nina Simone. We have a lot of coffees all named after people with disabilities.
And a great sense of humor in there too.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, puns.
I love it. Can you do it in a quick nutshell for people who are like me? I'm not a coffee drinker, but I am going to taste some Artery coffee here on the show. So stay tuned for that.
My wife hates coffee.
Oh yeah, Kate, I hear you, Kate. Yeah. What is the difference in a nutshell between light, medium, and dark roast?
Yeah,
because I think there's a lot of misconceptions.
For sure, and I think a lot of people think that dark roast is like jet fuel and kind of gets you going, and it's kind of a misnomer. Like dark roast actually has less caffeine in it than light roast because you're roasting it longer, so you're taking out all that stuff. But for us,
the dark just means roasted longer.
Yeah, the lighter we roast coffees, the more of the flavor of the coffee you're going to preserve. So for us in the specialty coffee world, we call it third wave coffee. It's roasting lighter just because it's like wine. You're getting all those tasting notes that you're not going to get from a darker roasted coffee. That's not to say a dark roast coffee can't be great. I always say like drink whatever roast level you want as long as you're buying ethical coffee to do it. Yeah. And our dark roast is not going to be nearly as dark as like a Starbucks dark, which has lots of oil in the bean, is really burnt in my opinion. Okay. And it tastes really roasty. Whereas our dark is probably more like a medium at a lot of other places. But in a nutshell, it's just how long it's roasted for. So most of our coffees tend to be on the lighter spectrum, but our bestseller is the Stephen Hawkbean. So Ottawa loves their dark roast. But we're just trying to show that there's a way of doing dark roast that can still preserve some flavor.
Yeah. Oh, that makes so much sense. And it really opens a world of possibilities. It's like infinite flavor profiles, I'm sure.
Yeah.
All right. Just before we wrap up with this second segment, I want to ask you, because obviously you support local. Why do you shop local, Will? What does it do for you?
I think there's two reasons. One, there's an actual person behind that business. So it's not just some faceless corporation that's just trying to like rob you of your hard-earned money. There's an actual person who depends on that job and who loves what they're doing. So when you're supporting a local business, and I always say like when it comes to supporting local, support the right local, like not just because a business is local doesn't mean it's going to be ethical. So actual person behind that who's making that product, who's put so much of their like heart and soul and energy into that product. So that's pretty amazing where you're like eating something or wearing something or something that's like just been crafted by someone and not just overseas large scale production. And then secondly, I think just from the quality perspective, if something is going to be made local from an artisan and someone who loves what they're doing, it'll probably taste better, or feel better, whatever it is.
More love and care.
Yeah. So I think it's just going to be a better product. So for me, it's like, why wouldn't you support local if you have the means to do so? And I get that for some people, our coffee is too expensive. I totally understand that. And not everyone can kind of,
budget that or
buy ethics through their wallet. I totally understand that. But there's a lot of people who can afford that bag of coffee or who can afford to support that local who still would rather just go and support Galen Weston, right? So I think there's that kind of nuance where some people kind of just take that convenience or just maybe don't think about how their dollar can really help small business survive, because a lot of small businesses are struggling. And, COVID really kind of put a dent in a lot of businesses. And a lot of my friends are still really struggling. Rent is through the roof. So, I think just supporting them with your dollar and not just like your Instagram which is great. Like supporting them in other avenues is fantastic. But buy their products. It'll really help people.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I think we're still in a critical phase post-COVID. There's a recovery happening, but interest rates are super high. There's loans left over from COVID that are coming up. The government's going to be calling in that money. That money that was like, oh, it's free and interest free 3 years ago. Yeah. Well, no, now you got to pay it back. Yeah. And there's a crazy number of small businesses that are like, how am I going to do that?
Yeah.
So any purchase is going to help with that. Thanks for sharing your thoughts on why shop local. Yeah. And we're going to take a little break and then we'll be back for our final segment where we're going to sample some coffee. If you are watching on YouTube or listening wherever you get your podcasts, please do like and share the podcast. Subscribe if you can, so we know we want to do a second season here of Why Bother as we wrap up our first season with an awesome session here with the Artery. So stay tuned and we'll be right back. everybody, welcome back. I'm your host for Why Bother here, Gareth Davies from Maker House with Will from the Artery. And we're going to hop right back into our third and final segment. This is our final segment of the year for the Why Bother podcast. So thank you all for tuning in or watching if you've been watching on YouTube. If you haven't seen all our other episodes, I encourage you to binge during this holiday week when hopefully you've got some time to rest. Also want to give a special shout out to our co-producers. Emily Smithers is behind the camera. Emily, give a little hi.
Hi.
And Jack Stanley is on the audio.
Hello.
And these are our social media manager and our assistant manager in store. But most importantly, they are the co-producers of the Why Bother podcast. So you have them to thank. And I thank them both for helping me through this journey. Also, a special shout out to Sean McDonnell from Do More Cool Shit Studios. That is where we are located in Hintonburg. Now let's dive right in. For those listening, we're going to do our best to describe the flavors. We're about to taste some Artery coffee on the spot. So if you can watch on YouTube, go for it. And I don't drink coffee, so this will be kind of interesting.
So if Gareth makes a face, it's not the coffee, it's Gareth. So
disclaimer.
Yeah.
So what did you bring for us?
So I brought us some experimental coffee. So most coffees are wash coffee. So in a nutshell, we call it coffee a bean, but it's really a seed inside a cherry. They take the cherry off, they wash it through water, then they kind of dry it on beds, and that's where kind of the fermentation happens, for lack of a better detailed explanation. But with these experimental coffees, they'll leave the cherry on the coffee throughout the process, and they'll also put them in these big vats. So this is a natural anaerobic coffee. So they put them in these big vats where they get no oxygen, so they get really funky and fermented. So you're going to taste some berries in this coffee, and you're going to taste some chocolate, but not what you would typically think of as chocolate and coffee. It's going to be a funky chocolate.
Okay.
So
I love berries and chocolate. The reason I don't like coffee, or I'm a tea drinker, is because I find it sort of bitter. And
for sure. Yeah, this is not going to be bitter. So,
okay. I've probably just been drinking the wrong coffee.
I think you have, yeah. So,
pour me a little sugar there. I think, can't wait to try it.
Smell it.
It does smell really good. I do smell the chocolate.
For sure. And that's
not smelling berries yet, but that's probably more.
And it's because it's a blend I made with two coffees. So our first Crack to the Future, which is the one I named after Michael J. Fox.
Yeah.
So that one's kind of taking it over a bit because it has such deep chocolatey funky notes, but that berry note will come at the end.
So this first Crack to the Future mixed blended with
Superfly.
Superfly.
Yeah.
Okay. Love it. Cheers.
Cheers. Thanks for having us.
Yeah. Happy holidays, everybody. Not as bad as I was expecting.
I'm going to put that on the bag. that's our new tagline. Yeah. Not as bad as I was expecting.
I think if I, went doubled this up with some cream and add some sugar, it's going to be a nice latte.
Yeah, but so this one, you can really taste that funky chocolate off the beginning. So it's it's chocolate, but it almost makes you kind of
there's some natural sweetness to that.
For sure, yeah. So, and it's funny, people often describe coffee or lighter coffees as sweet. I tend to prefer the term fruity because it's always
brightness.
Yeah, brightness. For some people, saying the word sweet may kind of throw them off a bit because it's not sweet. It's coffee. Yeah. But there's definitely berry notes and fruity kind of juicy notes. Also, the texture of coffee is going to be something you want to take in mind. So is it something that's going to coat your mouth and have a thick mouth feel?
It's not bitter.
No, it's definitely not bitter.
No.
Even our dark roast is not bitter. Bitterness comes from over roasted coffee. And I think people kind of confuse acids and bitterness.
Okay.
Acid in coffee is a good thing. So lighter roast coffees will have different types of acids, like citric acid, think of a lemon, or malic acids, think of a pear or a watermelon. Whereas bitterness is just that over roasted kind of make you kind of squish your face together. You're not going to get that off a really nice acidic coffee. So people kind of confuse the two and say, I don't like light roast, it's too acidic. You may not like acidic coffee, but it's too bitter. But it's not bitter. It's the acids, right?
Interesting.
So yeah.
I mean, I'm learning so much, and this is the furthest I've ever gone into a cup of coffee. I think I've had 5 sips for those who are listening.
And can you feel the acids in the back of your mouth when you're drinking it?
I think so. Is that what that is?
That's acid. Yeah. That's the same sensation you get if you were eating an apple, you kind of get like the back of that tingling in the back of your palate. Yeah. That's the same kind of acid you're getting from the coffee. Yeah.
It tastes like really good quality, like a complex profile. I'm not someone who's going to like pick up on all the
complex profile. That's impressive right there.
But yeah, I know lots of big words. As Will said earlier on the break, I am verbose.
Yeah. Which is why this session's running so long.
It's a special extended podcast for the holiday season. Right. But this is the furthest I've gone. And there's like that chocolate note. Is there a nuttiness in there as well? Or is that just like the berries maybe?
Yeah. I mean, this one I think I would describe more as just like a really kind of like fudgy chocolate. So maybe that nuttiness is coming from that really fudgy chocolatey.
So I always thought having kids would get me into coffee because that's what a lot of people say, you know, with the early mornings or lack of sleep. And it didn't. Like it didn't. Yeah. Kids didn't break me into coffee at least. So
it's not for everyone. I get it. Yeah. You know, some people are just not going to get into coffee, but I think it's the best.
This might be it though. Well, we'll see. Maybe I've come this far and I'll stubbornly, you know, not want to get into coffee.
So now let's try this chocolate with the coffee. So then you'll also notice how it impacts the cup of the coffee.
Okay, bonus tasting. So we do have some chocolate from the store. It is by Fraktals. And Fraktals are basically a Buttercrunch. So it's a chocolate with like a cracker or caramel and some nuts as well.
That's really good. Yeah. Now take a sip of coffee.
They know what they're doing.
That's really good though.
Really good. Do you like the Fraktals?
I like it. Yeah. I like the name too. I was trying to joke with your staff about, it reminded me of Battlestar Galactica. They'd always say frack instead of the F word. And then they're too young to even know what Battlestar Galactica is. So I feel really old again. But other than that, yeah.
Yeah, that's a good pairing. You can just pick a bag of Artery, a little Fraktals gift box, and Bob's your uncle.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you for bringing that in and for bearing with me as essentially like a coffee virgin, someone who doesn't really enjoy the flavor, but and I'm sure coffee lovers out there are going to taste the quality of the Artery roast.
Yeah.
We're going to move on, and I want to ask you, since it is the holiday season, you know, celebrating Christmas, or I believe you said you're Jewish, so you celebrate maybe Hanukkah. What do you do around this time of year? What's your favorite activity?
Yeah, so I am a Jew, but I always say that like no one does Christmas like Jews. I don't celebrate Hanukkah. I just go all into to Christmas. So I love Christmas. I beg my wife to like put up the decorations by like November 1st.
You're like, can we do it yet?
I love Christmas. So for me, I bring it on. I love the season. I love buying gifts for people and eating food and playing in the snow.
Gorging out. Yeah,
playing hockey. Like I just love all the things that kind of come along with the season. And even though like as a kid, I remember like we would do Hanukkah and I would just be waiting for Christmas. But at the same, so whatever reason, I just love Christmas. But I didn't know what a Yule log was. But But in my defense, we were talking about during the break, and
En français,
it's a bûche de Noël. So as a Quebecer, I live in Quebec. I know it's a bûche de Noël. So the Yule log just threw me off. I'm going to go back and say I love bûche de Noël. So
okay.
I'm back on.
We bother with
I definitely bother. I feel bad.
It is not a fruitcake, people.
Yeah.
Go get yourself a Yule log.
Yeah, cake in the form of wood. I'm into it. So,
all right, awesome. So we're going to wrap things up. But before we do that, what is the, we like to call
point of connection.
So how does human connection factor into your business? I think we've talked about this, but maybe put a fine point on it for us.
I think for me, like this business is about the people I get to work with and the people that we get to sell coffee to. So, you know, obviously my staff, like I have such a deep appreciation and deep love for my staff. One of my staff has been my best friend since we were 4 years old. So getting to go to work with your best friend is always
That's so cool.
Amazing.
Since you were 4, amazing.
Yeah. So Jim. So shout out to Jim who does a lot for this business. And it's all my staff are just like so happy to come to work. Like I do think that they enjoy their time and we like to get pizza at lunch and all that kind of fun stuff.
It's so refreshing to hear that, right?
Yeah. So I think I do this, you know, like for myself, like I don't take a salary from this job. So what I get out of it selfishly is those human connections and getting to connect with farmers. We just had Snyder, the farmer who grew this coffee, just visited us from Colombia at the roastery, his first time in Canada. And that was an incredible experience, getting to connect with someone who's growing the coffee and who has been such an
and can taste the finished product.
Yeah,
too.
Totally. Right. It's such an integral part of the business. So that's incredible. And also just like, I love connecting with other makers and other businesses. I love connecting with our customers at markets and getting to do all like my bad dad jokes. So like all those connections are kind of what makes all the hours standing in front of a roaster worth it, because standing in front of a roaster for 20 hours a week is a lot of time.
You got to be finding some joy in
so like,
other ways. Yeah.
I always say like small business is partly ego too. Like I think that if you really love your business and you really love your product, like that kind of becomes a part of you too. So it does kind of become part of your ego, for better or for worse, right? So for me, those connections to the people that I work with, to the people that I source coffee from, to the people that I sell coffee to, are what kind of make all that labor worth it.
It's the core of the Artery. And that's why community is right in your name as well. Sure. So kudos to you. We're honored to work with you, and thanks for being part of Maker House as well.
Thanks for supporting us since the get-go. Yeah.
Also echoing a lot of the reasons for why Maker House and why we do what we do. So where can people find the Artery as we go into a new year, into 2024, and wrap up 2023? Where's the best place for people to follow you, or what do you have? What are you looking forward to this year?
Yeah, follow us on Instagram. We have a really amazing Instagram account where we do a lot of disability advocacy. I probably don't post enough stuff about the actual products.
Well, yeah,
I was like, my staff's always like, you need to post more about the coffee. I'm like, I know. We need to sell the coffee. But yeah, it really is about like the advocacy and helping people kind of like, watch their ableist language and learn more about the disabled community. So that's really important to me. And big things are happening for us. We're moving to a new location this month or next month. Like we've taken over a new location around the corner from us.
So you're growing in a new space.
Yeah, we'll have a bigger machine soon, so we can kind of pump out our output. We'll have a space where we can host cupping sessions, so tasting sessions. So a lot of great things happening. So for us, it's the next year is about expanding while maintaining those ethics and maintaining that quality. So,
amazing. So yeah, follow the Artery on Instagram. Get in touch with the people behind the business. Find them at Canatech Road.
Yeah.
They're still the same area. It's just a new location. And find them at Maker House and other great shops
100%,
in Ottawa. So thank you so much, everybody, for tuning into our podcast. And thank you to all of our guests like Will for coming on. It's been a great season. We hope to see you next year. Be sure to like and share and subscribe to the podcast so we know that there is interest out there. And also, again, thanks to our co-producers, Emily Smithers and Jack Stanley, for making this happen. We will see you all hopefully next year. And be sure to go back and check out all the episodes if you haven't yet. Happy holidays. Happy New Year. Cheers.
Cheers.